Good evening to everyone, and welcome to another edition of Distilling Books with Socrates, where we chat with educators about books and research that can be used to inform our professional practice. I'm Claire Springer, and I'm excited to be here again tonight to host the next episode of Distilling Books. The book distillations can be used in our own professional practices to increase leading and learning on our campuses and in education in general. I'm excited to be here tonight with you, Sarah, a fellow Texan. She's in Houston, Texas. How are you tonight?
I'm good. How are you? I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so glad you're here. So Sarah is the inspired questioner at Socrates Head of School. Sarah, tell us a little bit more about your background and how you got to be a team member of Socrates.
Absolutely. So, growing up, I kind of always knew that I would be in education in some way, shape, or form. After grad school, I stepped into the public school arena for a couple of years as a teacher in lower school. And then I shifted into a dean of students role where I also continue to teach at the middle school level. And then recently, where I'm currently at, I stepped into a director of admissions role, which has been really interesting, takes on a whole different mindset when it comes to leadership. And I'm really excited to say that I am about to embark on a brand new journey to step into an upper school division head role here this summer. So I'm really excited.
So you're one of those that's been around the block, they say.
Yes, I have. And, I've always been interested in kind of seeing the school landscape from multiple perspectives. And I think I've been afforded that opportunity, which is great. But yeah, I'm really excited.
Well, very good. So tonight, to tell our viewers a little bit more, we're going to be talking more about the distillation of Dare to Lead by Brené Brown. We all know she's a fan favorite, especially in the world of leadership. So she talks a lot about that courageous leadership. And, just as an educator, I really think about that word courage, and it has a personal meaning to me through my grandmother, actually. But I think about courageous leadership a lot. And I'm excited to view that through the lens of Brené's work and your distillation. And, Brené talks about brave work, tough conversations, and whole hearts. So we're going to be able to dive more into that. I think we have 5 prepared questions. So let's get going. Are you excited?
I'm excited. I'm ready.
Okay, let's go. Question 1. I'd love to start by talking about the title of the book, Dare to Lead. It seems to suggest that leadership can sometimes be frightening or isolating with certain negative connotations. What's your interpretation of this idea, and what do you think that Brené is trying to convey through her title?
Absolutely. I think it's funny, sometimes before we read a book, we think of a title in one way, and then after we read the book, we think of it in an entirely different way. And after having taken a deep dive into Brené's work, I see it as a call to action. I think that she is challenging us to step up to the plate in order to be these daring leaders. It's the subtext for me, the brave work, tough conversations, and the whole hearts piece that I think really challenges us to create a culture among our team to really kind of allow them to come into this space with their whole selves, and then ourselves too, as leaders, to kind of present our whole selves as well. But the daring part, the word dare and daring leaders, she talks a lot about. For me, and kind of a thread that she talks about throughout her book is, not pretending. Don't pretend to have all the answers as a leader, that it's okay to ask the questions and to stay curious. So her title is all encompassing, but
yes,
it's really a call to action for sure.
Well, that word vulnerability really stands out to me, and we're going to talk about that in this next question. That the book seems to center around those 3 core values of vulnerability, trust, and courage. Share with us a little bit more about these leadership characteristics and some ways the book contemplates their importance in leadership settings.
Absolutely. I think these qualities, these values are familiar to us in our personal life, but maybe not so much in our professional life. Again, bringing up the call to action that these should be present in the workplace, regardless of what arena you're in. She uses the phrase rumbling with vulnerability. And as an avid sports fan, I love the term rumbling. I think about the push and the pull. I think about the presence of struggle and how that is okay, and how it is important to embrace the suck, and that there is slush and that we should be willing to kind of embrace that piece. That vulnerability is not about winning or losing. It's about continuing to show up even when you cannot determine or, control the outcome, I think is really important to remember. She talks about the dichotomy, those three values together, but the dichotomy of vulnerability and courage, and how you cannot be courageous and be a risk taker without being vulnerable, and how you have to kind of peel back those layers of fear and figure out, what's causing you or what is preventing you from being courageous. But I think of those three values, they're all strong and they're all important. But the one that I think resonates with me the most is trust, because without trust on a team, you're inefficient, you're unproductive. It leads to all sorts of things. And, I want to be on a team that's innovative and creative, and that it's a healthy culture. So she uses this acronym. She spells out the word braving, and she focuses on certain words like B for boundaries, and she uses reliability when thinking about the letter R, and how important that is in building those trust pieces. Trust is a big part, anytime you're stepping into a new role, especially to build those pieces, using empathy, making connections with others. And she talks a lot about why that's important.
Yeah, and I think when we don't have those trusts within our teams, how that impacts our work with kids, and how our students can suffer from that lack of trust in those adult relationships within our team. So
absolutely. Yeah, it's that top down, it's like you've got a model. I think one of the most powerful things that leaders can do, certainly from an administrative level, is to model making a mistake, and how you come back from that. How do you react to making that mistake? You have to be willing to model and being vulnerable. And like you said, it just trickles down. And at the end of the day, it's the kids that we're focused on. So we ourselves have to be in a healthy place.
And we teach our kids, if you can't make a mistake, you can't make anything. But do we as adults believe that and show that to each other, and then extend that grace when the mistake is made to regroup and start over? So there's some good points there. Everyone joining, please remember to subscribe to SchoolRubric. We have so many ways you can plug in, from live panel discussions to Interact Magazine to our new publication, Global Education Insights. We even have a lot of podcasts, so feel free to tune in to SchoolRubric's Facebook page, Twitter, and even website to see all of the things we have offering, including our distillations with Socrates. Okay, Sarah, you ready for number 3?
I'm ready.
As a leader in a school setting, I know that it can be very easy to talk about ideas such as risk-taking or being brave. But the reality is that making tough decisions can sometimes be very difficult and frightening. What are some of the ideas that have been shared in the book, or from your own personal experiences, about how to be afraid and brave at the same time, and creating a culture that acts with courage?
Absolutely. I think it's such a great question. I think it's easy for us to say that, yeah, I'm a risk taker when it comes to my decision making, or sure, I use courage when I'm thinking about rolling out new initiatives. But I think truly one of the bravest things we can do is thinking about one of her most powerful quotes, which is clear is kind. And I think that's truly what teams look, to leaders for, is clear is kind, but then the flip side of that being unclear is kind. So we are unkind when we aren't being consistent, when we aren't being clear, whether it be about expectations or priorities, or our captain of our ship over at Socrates, Mark Engstrom, a former direct report of mine, but also has kind of shifted into a mentor role as well for me, talks a lot about being mission driven. And I find that so true in this quote of clear is kind, that if you're not rooted in the mission of what it is that you're doing, and your team is not on board with that, then things can get sideways very quickly. When I think about clear is kind, I'm thinking about as an administrator, talking less and listening more, and how important that is. Even in our messaging of our emails, making sure it's concise. You don't need a whole story to convey a message. All of those pieces are really important, and I think she calls us to do that.
I love it. And it's so simple, yet so profound. And when you really think clear is kind, but then when you think of the opposite, unclear is unkind, that's when you're like, wow, makes you want to evaluate all systems and processes to ensure that there is that clear message that is rooted in the mission of the organization.
Absolutely.
So she has lots of quotes in this book, but one of the quotes from the book that resonated with me is daring leaders who live into their values are never silent about hard things. What does this mean to you, and why is this so important for leaders?
Sure. I feel like Brené Brown is a wordsmith. I love the word
Right?
that she chooses, that the live into. I use the phrase lean into a lot as well.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, you have to identify those values that are important to you to help guide you in having those tough conversations and not remaining silent. She talks about the idea of, core values are important to schools, they're important to organizations, companies, but she says we have a tendency to kind of be too excited about choosing our core values that we need to limit ourselves to only 2. Because beyond 2, you can't prioritize, and then therefore they become ineffective. So the 2 that I personally just connect, she has a long list of core values in the book, which I think is really nice too, because it allows you to reflect. But the 2 that I kind of am focused on right now in this new position I'm stepping into would be integrity and accountability. I think accountability is really powerful, when it comes to these conversations about leadership and holding yourself accountable, not just the people on your team, but again, it full circle back to mission driven. You have to hold everyone accountable to remaining on mission.
I think about Douglas Reeves has a quote that when we make decisions with health, safety, and values, we can't shy away from that. And, I think we can all agree that health and safety, we can probably all come to consensus on, but not everyone has the same set of values. And so as a leader, being courageous to stick to that, what you've identified as your core values. And I do like the limiting it to 2. It's a different perspective, because usually when you think about values, you're like this long list of things that you hold true and dear to your heart. But really and truly, how many of those do you live into on a daily basis? So that special number of 2 is a good guide. I like it.
Absolutely.
So one of the ideas conveyed in the book is the notion that we should be both dreamers and fact checkers, a term I believe Brené Brown refers to as gritty faith versus gritty facts. What are some ways that we could see this implemented in school leadership teams as the default lens by which we view initiatives and decisions?
Absolutely. So a little background kind of on this concept. She uses it through the lens of the Stockdale paradox, which is from Admiral Stockdale. He was a prisoner of war, and since then has shared his story about how the men that were among him, other prisoners of war, who were super optimistic, that were only positive all of the time, were actually the ones that perished first. And so that's interesting, right? Because you're thinking, well, those that were optimistic must have, had this just strong faith, and we're gonna get this, we're gonna do this. And he said it was those that had a balance between having that faith, and yes, we could possibly, get home and be rescued, but also this is our reality, and if we don't get out, then we have to be okay with that and come to peace with that. So it's like living this balance of here's the reality, but you can still dream and you can still have that faith. And so then that she incorporates that kind of in that leadership perspective. And the one thing for me that comes to mind when I think about this concept is that one of the most important qualities that I think leaders should have is forethought. And kind of that difference between when you start to roll something out in communication and education, 90% of what we do is communication. And so I think when you're thinking about that, you have to have forethought and be able to see possible avalanches that might be coming your way. You can over plan, which means that would look like, you don't have the faith to be a big dreamer, but then if you under plan or you don't, you haven't thought those pieces through, then it can look like, you've only, you haven't had those pieces of reality. And so another area that I think this concept really works is when thinking about goal setting, sitting down with faculty members and kind of setting goals, or sitting down as a class with your students and setting goals, for the year, and thinking about, dream big, let's really go for it. But then also let's look at our bandwidth, like what's really realistic here, So I love this concept so much. I think it's how we should live life, constantly being in check with reality, but also not limiting ourselves to, the possibility.
Not limiting and losing that hope.
Right.
Absolutely. Well, Sarah, this was super quick, super fast, but I think super informative. I really appreciate you joining us tonight. I hope that we've inspired some who have not dove into this book to go and purchase it, because I do think that it should be on everyone's bookshelf, as it definitely can ignite a fire and make you look at things through a different lens in terms of leading people in general, but especially in education. To all of our viewers, thank you for joining us this evening. We hope that you will return next month for our next Distilling Books with Socrates. And please like, follow, and subscribe to School Rubric. Thanks, guys. Have a good evening. Bye.
Thank you for watching School Rubric on YouTube. Make sure that you like, follow, and subscribe in order to stay looped in on all of our diverse collection of shows, interviews, panels, tutorials, and more from educators around the globe. And visit us at SchoolRubric.com for even more great content, such as our online articles, Interact magazine, featured podcasts, and more. Thank you.